There's something nostalgic about hearing those old mechanical clicks and whirs, the way the tapes rewind and play, the crackle of a message being recorded. I spend most of my days in my workshop repairing and restoring these machines. It's quiet work and I like that. No one bothers me here. The machines don't ask for anything. They just exist, waiting for someone to speak into them. But lately, the silence has changed. It's no longer comforting. It's unsettling. It all started with the first machine. I had picked it up at an estate sale about a month ago. The old woman who lived in the house had passed away, and her family was selling off her belongings. The house itself was a relic. Old wooden floors, faded wallpaper, and a musty smell that lingered in the air. Most of the things they were selling were junk. But in the corner of the living room, under a pile of dusty photo albums, I found the answering machine. It was an old GE model from the late 80s with wood paneling and big clunky buttons, the kind that collectors love. I paid for it, brought it back to my workshop, and started cleaning it up. It was in pretty rough shape, dust caked inside the cassette compartment, and the motor was barely functional. But I could fix it. I always could. As I was working on the machine, I found a cassette still inside. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes people left old tapes in the machines when they stopped using them. Most of the time, they were blank or filled with random messages, solicitors, telemarketers, or family members leaving reminders to pick up groceries. But this tape was different. The first message was just static, a long hiss, like the sound of wind over a phone line. I thought maybe the tape was damaged, or the machine hadn't recorded properly. But then, through the static, I heard it, a voice. Faint, almost drowned out by the noise. But there, it was a man's voice, speaking slowly, as if he was struggling to get the words out. "I'm still here." That was all. Just those 3 words, repeated over and over, each time more desperate than the last. "I'm still here." I rewound the tape, played it again. The same message, the same voice. But the more I listened, the more I realized something was wrong. The voice didn't sound like it was coming from a normal recording. It was too faint, too distant, like it wasn't meant to be heard, like it was coming from somewhere else. I turned off the machine, pulled out the tape, and stared at it for a long time. My hands were shaking, though I didn't know why. I'd listened to hundreds of old messages over the years, and none of them had ever affected me like this. But this one felt different. It felt wrong. I put the tape aside and finished repairing the machine, but the voice stayed with me. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The man's voice, the desperation in his words, it echoed in my mind, growing louder the more I tried to ignore it. I thought about throwing the tape away, but something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else. Either way, I couldn't let it go. Then the other machines started acting up. I had a few other answering machines in the shop, old models I was working on for clients. One of them was a Panasonic from the early 90s, a sleek black machine with an LCD screen and digital playback. I had just finished repairing the motor when I decided to test it. I popped in a blank cassette, pressed record, and left a test message for myself. When I played it back, the message wasn't mine. Instead of my voice, I heard the same static from the first tape, the same wind-like hiss. And then, faintly, I heard the voice again. "Still here." The exact same words, the exact same tone. But this time, it was louder, clearer, like it was getting closer. I turned the machine off, my hands trembling as I removed the cassette. I checked it again, just a blank tape, nothing on it but the test message I had recorded. But when I played it again, the voice returned. "I'm still here." I didn't understand. There was no logical explanation for what was happening. It was like the machines were picking up something, some kind of signal that wasn't supposed to exist. But how? These were old analog machines, not radios. They couldn't pick up stray frequencies. And even if they could, why was it always the same voice, saying the same thing? Over the next few weeks, the voice became a constant presence. Every time I tested a machine, it was there. Every tape, every message, it all led back to those same 3 words. "I'm still here." I tried ignoring it, tried focusing on my work, but the more I listened, the more I realized the voice was changing. It was growing clearer, stronger, as if whoever or whatever was speaking was getting closer. And then one night, I heard something new. I'm still here. Alan, it said my name. I dropped the cassette, my heart racing. There was no way it could have known my name. No one knew about these tapes. No one even knew I was listening to them. But the voice did. That night, I dreamed about the lake. In my dream, I was standing on the shore, the water black and still, stretching out into the darkness. The air was cold, and I could see my breath as I stood there staring at the surface. But I wasn't alone. There were figures in the water, just beneath the surface, their faces pale and bloated, their eyes open and unblinking. One of them spoke, "I'm still here." Alan, I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The dream had felt so real, so vivid. I could still feel the cold air, still see the figures in the water, their eyes staring up at me, their mouths moving in silent screams. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. The voice was everywhere now, haunting me even in my dreams. I stopped repairing machines. I couldn't bring myself to touch them. Couldn't bear the thought of hearing that voice again. But even without the machines, the voice found me. One night, I was sitting in the living room, trying to distract myself with an old movie, when the phone rang. I hadn't used my landline in years. No one ever called me. But the sound of it made my blood run cold. I didn't want to answer. I knew what I would hear. But something compelled me to pick up the receiver. There was static on the other end. That same hissing, crackling noise that had haunted me for weeks. And then the voice, "I'm still here, Alan." It was clearer than ever now, loud and sharp, like the person was standing right next to me. I dropped the phone, backing away from it like it was a snake, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay in this house with that voice. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and ran out the door, my hands shaking as I fumbled to lock it behind me. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. I found myself driving toward the lake. I hadn't been there in years. Not since I was a kid, when my parents would take me camping in the woods around the lake. I remember the water being so calm, so peaceful. It was the kind of place you went to escape the noise of the world, to find some quiet. But as I drove down the narrow road, the trees closing in on either side of me, I realized that the lake was no longer a place of peace. It was a place of silence, a silence so deep and oppressive that it swallowed everything around it. When I finally arrived, the sun had already set. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale light over the water, which stretched out before me like a black mirror. I stood at the edge, staring out at the surface, waiting for something to happen. And then I heard it. "I'm still here, Alan." The voice didn't come from the machines this time. It came from the lake. I stepped closer, my breath fogging in the cold air. The water was perfectly still, not a ripple in sight, but I knew the voice was coming from beneath the surface. I could feel it, like a pull in the pit of my stomach, dragging me closer to the edge. "Alan." This time, the voice wasn't just a whisper. It was louder, more insistent, as if whoever was speaking was right below the surface, just waiting for me to come closer. I took another step, the water lapping at the edge of my shoes. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me. And then I saw them, the figures from my dream, pale, bloated bodies floating just beneath the surface, their eyes open and staring, their mouths moving silently as they tried to speak. "I'm still here." Their voices echoed in my mind, filling my head with their desperate cries. I could see their faces now, twisted and contorted in agony, their hands reaching up from the water, trying to pull me in. I stumbled back, my heart racing, my mind spinning. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening. But it was. The voices grew louder, more frantic, as the figures in the water reached for me, their hands clawing at the air. "Alan, we're still here." I turned and ran, the sound of their voices echoing behind me as I fled into the woods. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The voices were still there, still calling my name, but I wouldn't listen. I wouldn't let them pull me in. I never went back to the lake after that night. I never repaired another answering machine, never listened to another tape, but the voices never left me. Even now I can hear them. Faint, like whispers on the wind, but always there. Always calling my name. I'm still here, Alan, and I know deep down that they're waiting for me.